All right. Can't you tell I'm an Indiana Jones fan? Yes, I have been wanting to review this book in particular, Indiana Jones and the Peril of at Delphi, by Rob McGregor, for years. I mean, we're pushing like, I don't know, 7 years since I picked up my original copy of this that actually burned to the campfire, to Adam finding this one for me in Oklahoma and sending it to me. So, thank you. That would be Bryant VRM and Red 5 Reviews are his channels. But anyway, Indiana Jones The Peril of Delphi is the beginning of a series of books that are prequels to Temple of Doom. As you know, Temple of Doom technically is a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, but they wrote several books that took place in the 20s before, and I think into the early 30s, shortly before Temple of Doom happens. And these were all done by Bantam. I think there's 12 of these books. There aren't that many Indiana Jones novels. Why? Unfortunately for Lucasfilm, when they partnered with Bantam, they said, oh, we also have this series called Star Wars, and a guy named Timothy Zahn that's going to write a book called Heir to the Empire. So naturally, Heir to the Empire took off. It's this big phenomenal thing. And Peril of Delphi, it's kind of obscure. All these Indiana Jones books are pretty obscure. Indiana Jones has never gotten the love that it quite frankly deserves. It's not like Star Wars. Nothing's like Star Wars. But I mean, George Lucas tried to make Indiana Jones as big as Star Wars. There's both Dark Horse and Marvel Comics for Indiana Jones. There are novels, there's some video games, but nothing really took off. But we're going to be talking about probably the most prolific author to write Indiana Jones, Rob McGregor. Rob McGregor got his start on Indiana Jones with the Last Crusade novelization, which you could check out at Paper Movies. We reviewed it 2 months ago, I do believe. And this sort of has continuity with it. So think of Indiana Jones and the Peril of Delphi as the bridge between the young Indiana Jones Chronicles and Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones. This is sort of an amalgamation of Sean Patrick Flanery and Harrison Ford. Although the young Indiana Jones Chronicles, I don't believe had come out when this book was written. So, anyway, this book is about a young Indy who is now a graduate student in linguistics, studying abroad in Paris, when his teacher, a Dorian Balekamos, who he has a crush on, asks him to help her on an archaeological dig because he can speak ancient Greek. This is something that comes from Last Crusade, where Henry Jones Sr. has Indy speak in Greek, counting Greek. So Indy's pretty fluent in ancient Greek. Well, of course, he falls head over heels over her. She's not what she seems. She's kind of the villain of this. And there's a whole cult that is obsessed with finding the new Oracle of Delphi. Delphi, these were sort of, if you ever seen 300, the naked women writhing around with the disfigured priests, they were oracles that were all drugged up and stuff, and they would predict the future. There's also an Omvalos in this. It's the artifact here, which Indy kind of just finds on accident, which I kind of love, because this isn't proficient Indy. Despite, I have some issue with this. Indy doesn't know how to fight, really, in this, but he went through World War I. I don't know if Lucas changed his mind when this was being written, that Indy was going to serve in the Belgian army or not, but that's a weird, funky continuity thing. But yeah, Indy's naive, and that's the big thing in this book. He's very, very naive. You can argue that Indy always is naive when it comes to women, but just in general, he's pretty naive about it. And it's funny. We get to see some different sides of Indy. We get to see his buddy Jack Shannon, who's a recurring Rob McGregor character, who's Indy's best friend in college, the University of Chicago. Jack Shannon's dad has mob ties and bootlegging ties, and Jack wants to just play jazz. That's his thing. And he shows up at the beginning of this book and kind of near the end, but he's a recurring character in Rob McGregor's books, and I like Jack Shannon. He's fun. We also get Indy's professor, Conrad, who gets Indy out of some trouble that he and Jack Shannon got into, where they made a senior prank on the day of graduation, where they hung the founding fathers, basically, like dummies that were supposed to be our founding fathers of the United States. Because Indy wrote a paper about the founding fathers that was not favorable to the narrative, and it just shows that Indy's a rogue. He's going to do what he's going to do, and he barely gets out of it without being expelled. So we get his Professor Conrad in this. Marcus Brody and Henry Jones Sr. are both mentioned, but they are not in this. There was a big, with Star Wars, George Lucas had parameters of what you could and couldn't do with Indiana Jones. For instance, none of these books are going to have Marion Ravenwood in there. That was a story that George Lucas was planning to put in Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which never saw the light of day. There's no Belloc. There's no Marion Ravenwood's father, I'm pretty sure. I don't think any of that was allowed. So you're not going to see a lot of movie characters. You'll see Marcus. Marcus has cameos here and there. And eventually, in these later books, Sala shows up. But you really don't see a lot of that sort of thing. So these books had to be creative, and you can have all sorts of new characters like Jack Shannon and Professor Conrad, who are Indy's allies. And I like that. I like that Indy has friends all over the place. He's a globetrotter. And we're seeing the beginnings of this in the Peril at Delphi. I will say the plot is fast-paced. The history works for me. There's some mysticism to it, but really not as much as you'd think. And I think that's because Rob McGregor wrote Last Crusade. There's a lot of mysticism in that. And he didn't want to necessarily do that again. Because you already have a villainous love interest, like in Last Crusade. I don't think he really dials it back compared to what we're going to see going forward in like Dance of Giants, where there's all sorts of weird things that happen in that book. But in this one, not so much weird. Indy gets beaten up real bad in this. He takes a beating. And I know he takes a beating in every Indiana Jones movie and most of the TV show, but he really gets messed up at this, like breaks ribs and stuff. It's bad. So he's not doing so hot in this. But we do get to see he wears the hat. He does end up with the whip eventually, but he doesn't have it at first. So, anyway, what do I think of Indiana Jones and the Peril at Delphi? I think it is a good bridge between young Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones proper. Don't think of this as an Indiana Jones novel, because you're going to be disappointed. Indy's not the globetrotter that he will be. He's very naive when it comes to a lot of things, and he's out of his depth. He's not even an archaeologist, technically. He's still a linguistics major. He's not even a professor yet. He's still a grad student. So, anyway, I rank this a good 4 out of 5. I think that it's pretty good. It's worth your time to read, but it may feel slow in comparison to the movies. It just has a little bit of a different pace. I think the pace is good enough to compel you to read, and I think it's worth your time to check out. So, anyway, join me next time as we review Indiana Jones and the Dance of Giants.